Hello and welcome to my channel. My name's Amanda and I'm happy that you're here. Welcome back to Midnight Murmurs, Stories for Swift Nights. This is episode 2 of season 2 in our winter season of this podcast. For this episode, I thought we could do some selections of Yuletide stories from across the world. So I went to my local Barnes & Nobles, I picked up an interesting looking book, and I bought it. And if you like any of the stories that you are about to hear today, I encourage you to purchase it and read all of the stories yourself. I want to take a moment to thank today's author, Tim Rayborn. Thank you for making such a delightful book. And please don't sue me. This is just for fun. This is like a slumber party-esque. I read a selection of scary stories aloud to the group. As I just mentioned, today's book is Scary Book of Christmas Lore. Forget about Jingle Bells and jolly old Saint Nick. 50 Terrifying Yuletide Tales from Around the World by Tim Rayborn. This is also my first time reading this book, so I am excited to dive in alongside you all. So if that sounds fun to you, please, I encourage you to grab a beverage, kick back, and let's dive in. Let's travel across the globe to Turkey to start with this book's first entry, St. Nicholas and the Butchered Children. Jolly old St. Nicholas, what is going to happen? Let's find out. Since St. Nicholas is at the heart of many of these tales and legends, we'll begin our journey down the dark paths of Christmas terrors with him. St. Nicholas, or St. Nick, is a handy alternative name for Santa Claus, but there really was a St. Nicholas who lived in Asia Minor in what is now Turkey from about 270 CE until his death on December 6, 343. December 6 is still his feast day. In his own time, he was Nicholas of Bari, a Greek bishop in an age where the Roman Empire was not officially Christian or even close to having a majority of Christians in its population. Not too much is known about his actual biography, but quite a few legends sprung up about him during and after his life. Many of these stories tell about his generosity and his secretly giving gifts to people or money to those in need. He was quite possibly the first secret Santa. One such story says he prevented 3 girls from being forced into prostitution by dropping sacks of gold through their window each night for 3 nights, which allowed their father enough money to pay dowries for them. The father discovered him on the 3rd night, but Nicholas told him not to tell anyone about this generosity. Nicholas was also said to have performed miracles, such as calming a stormy sea while he was sailing to the Holy Land and driving out demons. But the most famous legend about him concerns the fate of 3 children and a very evil butcher. The story goes that these 3 kids were out in the fields and lost track of time. They came to a town and to a butcher shop, which was lighted inside. They were tired and hungry, and now they were lost, so they knocked on the door. The butcher answered, and they asked him if they could have some food and a place to sleep for the night. He was only too happy to welcome them in, but he had no intention of giving them a warm welcome. Taking out a sharp knife, he killed and butchered each of them, dismembering them and placing the body parts in a barrel with brine for curing. He intended to sell the pieces as ham to unwary customers while the curing was finished. It brings to mind the story of Sweeney Todd. Why, yes, it does. That is one of my favorite musicals. Yes, it does. Ham, gross. Ooh, human ham, no thank you. Not at Christmas time, not any time of the year. A long time went by. Some accounts say as much as 7 years, but Nicholas learned of the crime and went to the butcher. He commanded that this evil man open up his salting barrel, and the butcher could do nothing but comply. Once open, Nicholas made the sign of the cross over it and commanded the children to rise. The 3 dismembered bodies were miraculously repaired, and the children brought back to life. No word on what happened to the butcher, but later legends say that he was forced to work with Nicholas ever after as a penance for his sins. We might meet some of his incarnations later in this book. This weird legend seems to be a fairly late addition to the story about Nicholas, probably originating in the Middle Ages, but from it, some began to see Nicholas as a patron saint of children. This, combined with his reputation for gift-giving, dovetailed nicely with winter traditions of presents and miracles, such that Nicholas now has pride of place as a holiday gift-giver in many European countries on December 6th, even if he's accompanied by that miserable old Krampus, which is who we're meeting next, incidentally. ... we have to meet Krampus next. He's just so famous when it comes to Christmas lore. So packing our bags, let's head on over to Bavaria, Austria, Slovenia, Croatia, and northern Italy. My, what a trip! And in Christmas time. Are you ready, dear listener? Let's go. Krampus is, of course, the granddaddy of all European winter holiday monsters, a fearsome, furry demon with a terrible attitude that can't wait to get out of the snow and cause mischief. He's certainly not the oldest beastie haunting the holidays, but these days he's definitely the most famous, so it's natural to begin our ghoulish gallery with him. Krampus accompanies St. Nicholas and has his very own night, the eve of St. Nicholas Day, in fact, the night of December 5th. Krampusnacht is the time where he is most active and when children have the most to fear. He is often depicted as a horned, satire-like, goat-footed demon carrying a large basket on his back, into which he will toss naughty children to drag them off to terrible tortures. He usually drags chains and carries a root, a bundle of birch branches that he uses to swat misbehaving children. If that's all they get from him, they should count themselves as lucky. His name might come from the old Bavarian Krampen, meaning dead, or the German Kramp, meaning claw. Either word seems like a good etymology for him. He has long been associated with St. Nicholas, and tales of Krampus and his punishments might date back as early as the 7th century, though it seems that the earliest written records of this frightening figure date back to the end of the 16th or the early 17th century. It's possible that fears of a menacing alpine winter visitor predate Christianity, and that the legends and the festivals were intertwined with Christian beliefs when the church realized that they couldn't be eliminated entirely. So this fearsome night creature was given a holy role within the church to punish sinners, especially children. The Nazis banned Krampus celebrations, but the people were having none of it, and as soon as those losers were dispatched, Krampus came right back, bigger than ever. Today, of course, there are Krampus celebrations all across the Alps and beyond, even in the United States. They start in early December and extend into January, no longer limited to one night, which is a great thing. There is no shortage of people willing to dress up as Krampuses. Krampi? And take part in parades and other big holiday get-togethers, posing for pictures, scaring kids, swatting tourists with fake birch switches, and having all sorts of fun. Dozens of people might show up dressed in their Krampus costumes, ready for a ghoulish party. Krampus is an institution now and a big business, though in the villages and the more remote areas of the Alps, celebrations tend to be smaller and more traditional, with just one costume demon accompanying the beloved saint as they make the rounds from house to house, checking in on the behavior of the local children. In recent years, Krampus has become something of a holiday classic, starring in horror movies, music videos, and more. This obscure figure from the frozen mountains of Europe has taken the world by storm. And he should. Misbehaving children? Get them out of here. They need to learn how to behave. Well, now that we've mentioned the frozen mountains of Europe, why don't we dive further into Germany, Austria, and Switzerland with the Night Folk. At the intersection of Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, unfortunate people could sometimes catch a glimpse in the wintertime of a mysterious and macabre procession, the Night Folk, also sometimes known as the Night Throng, or even more charmingly, the Death Folk or Death Throng. This group does not fly about chaotically in the sky or engage in overt violence. They are a solemn procession of lost souls and perhaps other beings from beyond the veil. They most often wear all black, such as robes and shrouds, if they are seen at all. Sometimes one merely hears them, most often with music. Indeed, the night folk often appear with haunting music playing, melodies that can be sweet and strange enough to entice mortals to follow after them. In this, the night folk are similar to the fairies of Ireland and Britain, who would sometimes lure mortals into their circles or their realms with enchanting music. Such mortals were usually never seen again. The night folk might even offer to teach new songs and new instrument skills to the unwary, but it's always best to say no. It was said that in the alpine areas, in the holidays especially, one needed to be on the lookout for the night folk. It was foolish to try to block their ghostly march, and if they processed towards a house or some other building, one always needed to open the doors on both sides to let them pass through. If not, disaster and ruin might befall the house or its owners. If the night folk were left alone, they would often leave those around them alone in turn. But not always. In some regions, the night folk could be relatively harmless, a sad procession of beings doomed forever to wander the land, denied eternal peace. But in some areas, especially in Switzerland, they could be outright maleficent if crossed. Here, the night folk often processed without music, or at least it was less enticing, and could herald plagues and disasters. One legend told of a man who encountered the procession after hearing the sound of a bowed instrument. He happened to catch sight of Death playing a violin and leading a long crowd of the death folk. The man saw many of his neighbors in the procession who were still alive. At the end, he saw himself. And so the prophecy came true, as one by one, each of those neighbors died of a plague, and he was the last to die of it. Well, that would ruin the holiday celebrations, wouldn't it? It was best never to gaze upon them if one could help it, for one would already know if they were coming by their sound, which could be anything from pleasant to horrible, from singing to drumming, to strange drones to the sound of rattling bones. Their presence often predicted the year to come. Beautiful music meant that it would be a good year, while a cacophony meant it would not. But really, most people lived in the hope that they would never hear the night folk at all. I agree. I would rather not meet the night folk. They don't sound very pleasant. And I definitely don't want to join their procession. All right, let's pack our bags again. It's been nice being in this central part of Europe, and let's head on down to Italy. We've heard about St. Nicholas. We've heard about Krampus. So, a man, a beastie. We just heard about a ghostly procession. Why don't we get some female representation? Let's hear about La Befana. Among scary Christmas and holiday figures, the Christmas witch, Befana, isn't as frightening as you might think. She brings gifts for the good children on Epiphany Eve, January 5th, leaving candies and other presents in their stockings if they have behaved, or lumps of coal and sticks if they haven't. Or sometimes the children get garlic and onions. At least they don't get eaten alive. If the family leaves out a small glass of wine and some bites to eat, she might even sweep up the house a little before leaving, although after a few too many glasses between all the houses, she probably wouldn't do a very good job of tidying up. True. Her name probably derives from Epiphany, and she has been a staple of Italian holiday celebrations for a long time. Some have suggested that she is actually connected to Strenua, goddess of the new year and the promise it brings. La Befana is described as looking like an old hag in a black hood who rides a broom and has soot on her face from dropping down so many chimneys. But you're not supposed to catch sight of her, or she'll give you a thump on the head or shoulders with her broom, a good way to keep anxious children in their beds that night. She sounds like any good, old-fashioned mom. Boom, get back into bed. There are various legends about her origin. One says that the Magi, who had come to honor Jesus, asked her where the infant Jesus was, but she didn't know. Instead, she offered them lodgings for the night, and the next day they offered to let her join them. But she declined since she had work to do. She's very hardworking, you know. She soon changed her mind and decided to set out to find the baby. And so she still roams the world, looking for the child she never got to see and leaving presents for all children. A less happy version of the tale says that she had a baby of her own, but tragedy struck and the child died. She was overcome with grief and set out wandering when she heard of Jesus' birth. Thinking in her madness that the child was hers, she tried desperately to find him. When she did, she brought gifts to him, and in return, she was made the mother of all Italian children. Still, another grim version states that she turned away the Magi because she was too busy with her chores, but feeling guilty about it, she went after them. She brought gifts and a broom for Mary, but wasn't able to find the baby Jesus, so she now wanders the world forever, looking for a child that she will never find. She leaves gifts at every home, hopeful that one day she will complete her quest. Befana is a mainstay of public celebrations of the day, where many actors will dress up as her. Often children receive lumps of coal as gifts, which are really pieces of rock candy colored black, a fun continuation of an old tradition. And it might imply that they've been a bit naughty in the previous year, but not too much. No matter what version, she has a sad backstory, but it's nice that she has the generosity to leave presents for all of the children around the world. It's very sad. Dear listener, comment down below. What do you think the meaning behind Befana putting her chores before an important religious event? What do you think that signifies in one's life? For me, the message that I walk away is don't put your busy work in front of the important things in life. Don't spend your life doing chores and marking off your to-do lists and forgetting to live. Hopefully that's a positive message to walk away with. All right, you know the drill. It's time to pack our bags again. We're leaving Italy and we're going up to Norway. It's time to get some snow, really get into the Christmas season, you know? And since we just read about La Befana and how she rides a broom and comes down people's chimneys, why don't we read about the Nordic tradition of the hiding of the brooms? Wow, I can picture myself in Norway now. Can you? Norway is a vast, beautiful country filled with stunning wilderness, majestic fjords, and apparently a lot of evil spirits and malevolent witches. And these creatures of the night like nothing better than to come out on Christmas Eve to cause no end of trouble. So what can a traditionally superstitious and vulnerable Norwegian do for protection? The answer is really simple. Hide all of the household brooms in closets where said witches and spirits can't find them. If you don't do this, they will enter your house, steal the brooms, and ride about in the night, doing evil and probably ruining Christmas for everyone. Some people in Norway still practice this ancient custom, mainly for fun these days. What could be better than scaring your children with tales of malicious creatures invading your house and taking things on the very night when benevolent old Father Christmas, or some equivalent, is set to appear and give our presents? Of course, if you have a lot of cleaning to do on the night before Christmas, you should probably get on with it sooner rather than later, and remember to put all your brooms away before turning in. Better yet, just save the work until December 26th. Mops and feather dusters are probably okay to leave out. A witch riding a mop would just look ridiculous. This curious custom probably has a number of origin stories and might even date back to pagan times. While spirits riding brooms were not a legend in the Viking Age, the idea of evil spirits all around certainly was. The good spirits of the land also had to be honored and placated, lest they turn against, say, the owner of a farm and cause troubles of their own. While witches were not necessarily regarded as evil, there were both women known as Volva, sorry, I know I just butchered that, meaning wise woman, and practitioners of a kind of magic known as Sirjar, apologies again, which was associated with the goddess Freya. The women, and sometimes men, who practiced it were often viewed with suspicion and might have lived apart from the community, only to be consulted for help when they were needed. They didn't ride brooms, but they might carry an iron wand or some other implement that was a focus for their power. Freya herself was not an evil goddess at all and was widely worshipped and adored. After the coming of Christianity, though, she was thrown under the proverbial bus like the other Norse gods and demonized, so the idea of wise women or witches being servants of evil probably took hold, or was at least forced on the local populations. With the rise of the European witch-hunting crazes from the 15th to the 17th centuries, ideas about witches took on more solid form, including the notion that they rode around on broomsticks in the service of the devil. And what better night to cause more harm than on the eve of the holiest day in the Christian year? So, it was imperative that all good folk hide away their brooms to stop as much evil as possible before the arrival of Christmas Day. It was also a good excuse not to clean for a bit. Seeing the snow and the northern lights in Norway with you has been magical, dear listener, but it's time to travel to Ukraine. We're going to pretend that we're traveling back in time to the Ukraine of lore, because traveling there right now probably would not be the smartest idea. My heart goes out to all who have been displaced and affected, and my hope is the issues going on can be resolved quickly and that people can live safely and in their chosen homes. With that being said, let's learn about Christmas spiders. Ah, spiders at Christmas! What could be more festive? If your arachnophobia is already getting stirred up, you might want to give this entry a miss. Sorry, you don't have a choice. But it's really not as creepy as it sounds. In Ukraine, there is a tradition of spiders weaving webs at Christmas, so many people decorate their Christmas trees with at least one spider web ornament. despite the terrifying potential that such an image brings, is actually a rather sweet custom. There's an old Ukrainian folktale about how it all started. Once upon a time, there was a widow who was very poor and lived in a small home with her children. Outside, there grew a pine tree, and one day, a pine cone dropped from it and fell to the ground. Not long after, the cone began to grow a new tree. The widow's children were happy about this because they thought that it might make a good Christmas tree when the time came, so they helped it grow tall enough to be a proper size for their tiny house. As Christmas approached, they brought it inside, but there was a problem. Since they were so poor, they had no decorations to place it on, and they were saddened knowing that they would wake up to a bare tree on Christmas Day. The children started to cry and went to bed sobbing, their tears continuing well into the night. Now, the home was old and naturally had resident spiders. These creatures heard the children's cries and decided to do something about it. They crept out, went to the tree, and climbed up into it. Once there, they began to spin webs in beautiful patterns and shapes, decorating the tree as if with ornaments. When the children woke up the next morning, they were shocked and delighted to see that their tree had been decorated by their little spider friends. They called to their mother to come and see the wonder before them. She was as amazed as they were. One child opened a window, letting in sunlight that glistened and sparkled on the webs, creating beautiful colors of silver and gold and making the tree twinkle as if it had candles in it. Everyone was delighted and grateful for this lovely gift that the spiders had left for them. They realized that while they were poor, they were rich in other ways. And this is why many Ukrainians now put spider ornaments in their Christmas trees, to remind them to be grateful for what they have and that precious gifts don't have to be expensive or lavish, and all because of the generosity of a few kind spiders. An old superstition in Ukraine, Germany, and Poland says that it's good luck to find a spider web or even an actual spider in your Christmas tree. It's also possible that the mainstream tradition of adorning Christmas trees with tinsel is a remnant of this old belief in the beauty of spider webs. So just keep that in mind the next time you're decorating your home. I think that was a lovely story. I love the line, "They realized while that they were poor, they were rich in other ways." Isn't that so true? But there is just so much more to life to be rich in. Dear listener, time to transport ourselves from Ukraine and transport ourselves to Iceland because we've got a kitty to go see. Yes, I'm talking about the Yule Cat. The idea of a Yule Cat might seem appealing at first. A soft, cuddly little feline to warm one on a chilly evening and perhaps curl up in front of a cozy fire, purring and content. Or maybe he brings presents to good children, like so many other fantastical beings out there. But, oh no, definitely not. The Jólakötturinn of Iceland is terrifying, but for what might seem really mundane reasons. First of all, this is no mere house cat. The Yule Cat is enormous in size and lies in wait in the dark to exact revenge on hapless children. But what is their crime? Their clothing. Yes, you see, an old folk custom in Iceland was that children who did all of their chores would receive new clothes for Christmas. Now, most children these days cringe at the thought of Christmas clothing. They dread receiving either socks and underwear, shudder, or some horrible holiday sweater that they will be forced to wear at the next family gathering while shriveling up in embarrassment. But for children living in the harsh and cold climate of Iceland, new winter clothing would have been most welcome, and they were expected to wear new clothing on Christmas night. Why? Because the Yule Cat would come and check up on them. Yes, this gigantic feline would creep into every farm and village on Christmas night and peer into each window to see what the children were wearing. If they had been good, they would be adorned in their fabulous new Christmas digs, or have them at hand to show off. But if the children had been bad, i.e., they hadn't done all their chores and didn't have at least one new item of clothing, the cat would do two things. First, eat whatever dinner was made for them. But going hungry was the least of their worries, for next he would drag the naughty children out of their homes and eat them as the main course. Naughty kitty, bad cat. Written legends of the Yule Cat only date back to the 19th century, but the tradition is probably much older than that. The Norse goddess Freya was said to ride in a chariot drawn by two cats, and a number of other beings could shapeshift at will, so it's possible that belief in the monstrous cat originated in pagan times. But it might just as easily have been an invention of worn-out parents who needed the children to pull their own weight around the house. In addition, it seems to have become a tradition so that those who were better off would be mindful of those who were not. The poor might need the charity of some new, or at least new to them, clothing to stave off the dreadful fate of being snapped up by the ravenous monster cat lurking in the snowy wilds outside their dwellings. If you could avoid getting eaten, you were probably going to have a good year. I think the Yule Cat and I would get along great. Is that a bad thing to think? He's like Krampus. He is like there to punish the naughty children. And I think that's delightful. I think Krampus and the Yule Cat should team up and have adventures together. And then you've got Saint Nicholas as the third comedic relief, good guy buddy of the three, guys, stop, guys, please, guys. That sounds like a future instant classic. And then they could meet La Befana on the way. I'm seeing the potential here. I'm seeing our travel adventurer in front of us. You and I, dear listener. We're going through this Yuletide lore and meeting all of these characters in our quest. This is really fun. And since we're already in Iceland, we can look back across the ocean at Pan America to today's final entry, because I wanted to leave with something scary and kind of silly. It's Winter Werewolves. Ah, nothing says Christmas like werewolves. But what could be more festive than transforming by the light of a full moon into a bloodthirsty beast that mindlessly brings death and misery to local populations of snowbound villages in the darkest time of the year? Agreed! It has to be worth at least a few carols, right? So, how on earth did werewolves get associated with the holidays? Wolves were highly feared winter predators, of course, and while they don't attack humans, despite all of those movies and TV shows you've seen, they could take livestock and cause many other problems. So the idea that someone might deliberately turn into a wolf, or at least have no control over their transformation, was a fear that haunted the minds of many in Europe and beyond for centuries. I mean, just look at Jacob from Twilight. In some areas, it was dangerous to even say the word wolf between Christmas and Epiphany, because people were afraid that doing so would summon them, or rather their lycanthropic counterparts. Many people believed that it was better never to say the word wolf in December at all, just to be sure. Oh no, I've said it so many times already. To make matters worse, traditional folk belief in Germany, Italy, and Romania held that if one was unfortunate enough to be born on Christmas Day, especially at the stroke of midnight, one was at a far higher risk of becoming a werewolf because that day was set aside for Christ alone and no one else should be born then. He can't share the day. He wasn't even really born on that day. That makes him out to be greedy. I don't think he'd like that. I don't. Okay. I'm getting my answer right after I displayed my judgment. Not that this is something an individual can control, of course, but it might have also tied in with the belief that abstinence was preferred at Easter time in the spring. The night of St. Lucy, December 13th. Taylor Swift's birthday? I mean, what? I meant the night of St. Lucy was thought to be an especially likely time for werewolves to appear, whether there was a full moon or not. Oh, that's funny. Oh, that's funny. Oh, that's funny. Oh, that's funny. Okay, we gotta watch out on December 13th because it's a likely time for werewolves to appear. Werewolves showed up throughout Europe at this time of year, and they had their own appalling celebrations. I like how he phrases that. Their own appalling celebrations. In 1555, the Swedish cleric Olinus Magnus, translated here by Anglican priest Sabine Baring-Gould, wrote that in areas such as Lithuania and Prussia, quote, "On the feast of the Nativity of Christ, at night, such a multitude of wolves, transformed from men, gathered together in a certain spot, arranged among themselves, and then spread to rage with wondrous ferocity against human beings and those animals which are not wild, that the natives of these regions suffer more detriment from these than they do from true and natural wolves. For when a human habitation has been detected by them isolated in the woods, they besiege it with atrocity, striving to break in the doors, and in the event of their doing so, they devour all the human beings and every animal which is found within. They burst into the beer cellars, and there they empty the tons of beer or mead, and pile up the empty casks, one above another in the middle of the cellar, thus showing their difference between natural and genuine wolves." End quote. Drunk werewolves? That makes the whole situation even worse. Agreed. Agreed. There was also a late medieval Baltic legend about a boy with a lame leg who would summon the devil's followers to a general holiday meeting, which was not optional, by the way. Anyone who refused or was slow to respond would be lashed with an iron whip to get them there. At said gathering, everyone transformed into wolves and then went off to commit mayhem, presumably to ruin the holidays for everyone else. Yeah, Christmas werewolves were once a big deal. And that is the end of our selections from Scary Book of Christmas Lore. Forget about Jingle Bells and Jolly Old Saint Nick by Tim Rayborn. I am really enjoying this book. This author has a really funny narrative voice, and I appreciate him giving us all of the lore from these legends while also giving us a little chuckle here and there. I think that is important to have an entertaining book that you want people to read. So if you enjoyed this video, please pick up a copy of this book. This is not sponsored in any way. I just think this is a great book. And if you enjoyed this video, I might make a part 2 with a couple more selections out of this book. I don't want to read them all because I want to leave some of them as a surprise for you when you read it for yourself. So if you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more videos like this in the future. I hope you're having a wonderful winter season, and I'll see you in the next video. Prost!